time. I have one such diary I have here is with me. I have noted down many developments in the past few days. I think I may have some at least 15 or 20 such diaries over the past maybe 6 months. So yes, this diary in particular is connected to the Makkah Masjid blast case. And coming back to a reporter's diary, like I said before, many things do not make it to print or to other forms of maybe broadcast or whatever. Uh, the thing is that I would like to use what an author of popular fiction. I mean, I think I know a lot of you don't like him, but yes, I consider him as one of the most prolific authors of our era. Stephen King, he says that the ideas that stay with you are worth pursuing. You don't jot down ideas number one, number two, number three. No, that's not how it works. But the ideas, you make mental notes of these ideas, and once you and over a period of time, let's say if you have 10 ideas and one or two stick in your mind, those are the ideas worth pursuing. So I think that the mind and a reporter's diary act as a sieve, through which a churning happens, and the ideas that are pursuing are, left on top of the sieve, which you just do that. So Makkah Masjid blast case is one such idea. So I must tell you where I was on that fateful day, 18th May 2007. I was working with a real estate firm, and I was at Hyderabad Central having noodles at a noodle. I think the place was called Noodle Bar, and I saw on the TV that the news had broken of the blast. I was with a few people, I think 3 or 4 people, and the reactions to the blast were very very strange. There were broadly two types of reactions. One was that, "Arey bhai, iska stock market pe kya fark padega?" That is one thing. The other was I was confused. I thought, how can this be a reaction? And then I was worried about the loss of lives, and I was worried about a lot of other things as well, as how it works. So that is where I was, and that was my state of mind when I was when the blast took place. And I am a journalist, and whatever I do, whatever I say is by means of stories, and I look through a lot of things through the lens of a story. One of my teachers said that literature is journalism at leisure, and journalism is literature in haste. Now, before we speak about the Makkah Masjid blast case, I think, rather it is my opinion, that it is very important to know what Hyderabad is, or rather the events over the past 50 or 60 years, pre-independence and post-independence. What were the crucial events that transpired? The history Hyderabad has with communalism, and the history that Hyderabad has with terrorism, or rather alleged acts of terrorism. So let me start by, let you start in around the 1930s. Incidentally, May 19th was the birth anniversary of Nathuram Godse. And interestingly, Nathuram Godse was in Hyderabad in 1938 and 1939. He was associated with the Hindu Mahasabha, and both the Hindu Mahasabha and the Arya Samaj, they were indulged in a pitched confrontation with the Nizam of the Hyderabad state, primarily because of the fact that both these bodies believed that that the rights and the civil liberties of the Hindus were being trampled upon by the Asafjahi dynasty rulers. So Nathuram Godse, interestingly, he immersed himself into this movement in Hyderabad, and he was imprisoned here from 1938 to 1939. And this is what Dhirendra K. Jha has written. It's a very beautiful piece. You must read one if you have the time. The agitation continued till 1939, and Godse led a batch of maybe 8 or 10 people, as is found in records. and he was only released when the agitation subsided. So that's an interesting thing, and this is, in a manner of speaking, what happened. A very brief, very short history of communalism in Hyderabad. And of course, there was the Hindu Mahasabha and Arya Samaj on one side, and there were the Razakars on the other. We know how and what Razakars are, and how it turned out for them. Now, let me take you forward by a few years. We must also talk about how the walled city, back then it was a walled city of Hyderabad, how Hyderabad was populated and by which people it was populated. So there were 4 quadrants of Hyderabad. Let's think of it this way. There are 4 quadrants of Hyderabad, and in the southwest quadrant lived the nobles, the Paigas. And in the northwest lived the Jagirdars. I have a small, it's a very rough, and my apologies for the atrocious sketch. Maybe you can see. Yeah. So on the northwest, also moved in migrants who were the Marwadis and the Bohras. These were primarily the traders, and they settled in the northwest. They settled in the southwest and the southwest of the southwest quadrant of that place. And this was primarily to facilitate transactions with the nobles. And in the northwest, there were the Jagirdars. Interestingly, what happened was the Marwadis moved into the northwest quadrant of Hyderabad, and they slowly began buying properties of Jagirdars. In Hyderabad, we call them Deodis. Deodis are more or less like Havelis, an ecosystem in itself. And then again, in the 1930s, Pathargatti was constructed. Pathargatti, a lot of people know what Pathargatti is, but then some people who may not be from Hyderabad, for them, Pathargatti was, in a manner of speaking, a business district where it moved from Napul to Charminar. That's how it was, and it was a central business district, and Marwadis moved into this quadrant because of that. In 1948, there was an out-migration of the Muslim elite, simply because of the fact that, as everybody knows, because of the fact that Muslims had lost positions of power, and they tried to move out. The Muslim elite tried to move out, and again, this is again when Marwari traders bought the Deodis, and these Deodis primarily consisted in the Pathargatti and Rekabganj area, and this continued from 1930s to 1982, and there's a reason why it stopped in 1982, and that is and the impression that I get from my perusal of certain documents is because of the fact that and of course by talking to a lot of people who've seen the era, is because of the fact that communal riots and rather communal conflagration increased in the early 1980s, late 1970s, early 1980s. They became more pronounced and more frequent. I'd like to share some statistics with you. In 1971, there were 88 Marwadis, and in 1981, there were 1,200 in that particular area. In 1951, the census, there were 319,000 people, and 69% of them were Muslim and 25 were Hindus, the rest belonging to other communities. Interestingly, documents, they reflect a drop in population from 1951 to 1961 in 10 years, and then the population reversed in 1961 to 1971. So the population stood at 2.12 lakh in that particular part of Hyderabad. And interestingly, the population of Muslims dropped. This was 55% and Hindus 45%. And then again, 2011, the population has seen, according to the census of 2011, there was again a change in demography. The numbers increased. If I'm not wrong, I had done a story also, the population of the old city, but this included the extended portions of the old city as well. So I think the population of the Hindus back then was 34, 35%, or 36, around 36, 37%. So now coming back to the Makkah Masjid in the 1940s era, I have another really poorly drawn sketch. If you see, this is the Makkah Masjid. This is the Makkah Masjid. Here is a place called Muhajirin Camp. So there are 150 houses in Muhajirin Camp, and this is very important that I mention Muhajirin Camp. It is simply because of the fact that Muhajirin Camp is a settlement, which abuts the northern wall of the Makkah Masjid. It has an entrance into the masjid, a direct entrance from Lad Bazar is a bazaar, of course, where you get lacquered bangles. From Lad Bazar to the Makkah Masjid, you have to pass through Muhajirin Camp. In 2017, I did a story about Muhajirin Camp. I spoke to a lot of people there, and they said that they fled from places in Marathwada and parts of Karnataka. And the expression they use is police action se bachne ke liye hum log bhag ke aaye. That is what they said. But there are two things. One is, of course, that there was, and rather police action is a misnomer for Operation Polo, the annexation or merger of Hyderabad into the Indian Union. And now the other thing is that after speaking to people who are a little more informed, they said that this was also the migration into Muhajirin Camp was also because of the fact that people were fleeing communal conflagration after, during the partition. So there were reprisals in certain parts of Marathwada and Karnataka, communal conflagration there. The other bit, and it's a very important bit that I mentioned, that there are a lot of people or other victims of the Makkah Masjid blast who were or still are residents of Muhajirin Camp. Now, I'd like to take a jump by a few decades from 1948 to, let's say, 1969, 1970. There was another communal conflagration, and before 1969, for a period of time, there was a brief lull in communal activity for various reasons, socio-economic, and the loss of livelihood, and people were shaken by what had happened. So this happened in 1969 in an area called Chappal Bazar. Chappal Bazar is near the Kachigoda railway station. That, a lot of people say, was one of the first communal conflagrations in Hyderabad post-independence. There were two lumpen elements. One was Muslim, one was Hindu, and they were apparently criminals. And an argument ensued between these two, and one of these lumpen elements struck the other and killed him. And that was given a communal spin, and that was and apparently that was because of the fact that these two had a disagreement over shares of whatever they used to do. So there was a procession, a smallish procession, after which there was communal conflagration. I am told nobody died, but I have to once again look into the records, what they said. But then there was a lot of fear, and there was looting in that particular area. A few of my relatives live in that area, and they told me that this had happened. A few of my acquaintances said that their houses too were looted. Now I'll take a step forward, just briefly touching upon important communal conflagrations. There was a communal conflagration in 1978. There was a communal conflagration in 1981 too, in 1981. And these were to do major cultural or religious processions. And the processions, of course, as you also know, even in these times are a very, very, dicey affair. And that's because of the fact that processions pass through sensitive points, pressure points, like the police is likely to call them. And these processions, invariably, they create some sort of communal discord. Of course, not always, but sometimes, yes. Then there was a brief lull again, and then we get to know about some alleged cases of terrorism and cases of terrorism, the Shahid Bilal case, the Azam Ghori case. And in 2007, May 18, the Makkah Masjid blast happened. There were 2 cases registered. This is just a brief background. 2 cases registered, both at Hussaini Alam police station. And incidentally, I must also tell you the security agency which finished its probe, or rather which discharged its duty, was the National Investigation Agency, which was formed in 2008, a year later. And after the Law and Order Police registered the case was transferred to the CBI. The CBI re-registered the same case, and then was transferred to the NIA. So 18th May, which was a few days from before, as in today is the 21st, a few days before, I was a little upset. Not exactly upset, I was a little concerned. I was concerned, I had this feeling that, has Hyderabad forgotten the Makkah Masjid blast case? Has Hyderabad, has it faded from our collective memory? And the first thing that you do to see whether that a certain case is true or not is you just jump onto social media, just see if somebody's talking about it. That is an indicator, perhaps. So I was, I saw that a few people were tweeting about it, and then I was reassured that it did not fade from the collective conscience or collective memory. There were a lot of people who died and who were injured. I'll just give you a brief number. So 9 people died in the Makkah Masjid blast case. There were injuries, and there were a lot of people who were maimed. So 9 people died in the blast, and soon after the blast, there was unrest. People really, there was in a manner of speaking, there was a mob-like formation of people, because they were confused. They did not know what happened. And then when it struck them, they got really upset. They got really angry. The police opened fire into the crowd, and 5 people died of bullet injuries, and a total of 61 people were injured. There are a few names I would like to. No, I won't say names, but yes, there were 5 minors who were injured. Victims were taken to. There were more than 5. I'm sorry. The victims were taken to corporate hospitals, they were taken to government hospitals, so on and so forth, and where they were treated for their injuries. Now, after the Makkah Masjid blast verdict was delivered in April, April. So a lot of people were very upset. A lot of people, they were outraged. The most commonly used line was, who perpetrated the Makkah Masjid blast? And they said that was nobody behind this blast, and then a lot of people started trying to make some sort of effort to find out what happened. And the first thing that they do is they file an appeal. The Special NIA court had delivered its judgment, after which an appeal was filed. Now, before the appeal was filed, and till the time the High Court of Hyderabad was approached, it's a very interesting thing. There were some groups who were working parallelly on the case, and I happened to speak with a lot of them, a lot of the people who were part of these few groups. They were working parallelly. Again, the intention was to seek justice, and a lot of brainstorming sessions happened. But invariably, a group which filed the appeal in the High Court, it comprised 2 victims, a team of lawyers from Hyderabad, Mehboob-Nagar, and Delhi, and a few people who were very interested in the case, who were working on the case. The first thing which came across as a massive hurdle or as a shocker was that the limitation there's a limitation on appeal, there's a bar. So it was found that we had crossed the stipulated period of time as to when an appeal can be filed. So that came across as a very worrying point. The other thing is that when these groups approached the court for documents, it took some time, nearly 3 months till vetted, attested copies were given to them so as to file the appeal in the High Court. Two aspects of the case. One is that the NIA Act of 2008 mandates, according to Section 21, subsection 5, that every appeal in that section shall be preferred within a period of 30 days, and 30 days of the judgment or sentence of or order. And then the other proviso is that provided that the High Court may entertain an appeal after the expiry of the said period of 30 days, if it is satisfied that the appellant has sufficient cause for preferring the appeal within that period of 30 days. And then the proviso is provided that no appeal shall be entertained after the expiry of 90 days. So this basically this proviso, it states that after it puts a complete bar on appeals in the High Court after 90 days. This was a very difficult thing for the appellants to navigate. Now, before I move forward, I would like to say that there were primarily three kinds of people who were the victims of the Makkah Masjid blast. One, the 9 people who died in the blast. Then there were people who were injured in the blast. Then the people who were injured by the police firing. The third set of people were the scores of Muslim youth who were picked up and falsely implicated. Later, they were given compensation. They were given they were given certificates of conduct, certificates of character that they had nothing to do with the case. So these three sets of people are very, very crucial here. One of the people who was picked up, I used to speak a lot to him, Sayyid Imran. He used to share with me gruesome details of what had happened to him while he was in police custody. How till the time I spoke to him, it's been a couple of years that I spoke to him last, how he faced massive problems when it came to finding employment. When he was employed, there was some sort of Damocles sword hanging over his head. People used to come to the offices and they used to keep a tab on him, and subsequently he was an engineer. He found it very difficult to sustain jobs. So these two or three sets of people are very important to know. Then let me come back to the case. Then an appeal was filed. The appeal again was a combined effort of lawyers from Hyderabad, Mehboob and Delhi. A senior lawyer from Delhi had helped in filing the appeal. The appeal was against the special NIA court judgment, which stated that certain provisions, or rather certain sections of the Indian Evidence Act were not adhered to whilst filing evidence, and the sheer volume of case records is huge. There are hundreds of pages of thousands of call records which are there, and unfortunately the NIA could not, the special NIA court declared that they could not, the call data records were not in adherence with the Indian Evidence Act. Now there are and which is why people where the accused were acquitted. Devendra Gupta, Lokesh Sharma, Asim Anand, Bharat Mohan Lal, Rajendra Chaudhary were there. So there were over 200, I think around 226 witnesses who were examined, and there were many documents which were also examined. Now, while I was speaking to the victims and also with the people who were really working hard to file an appeal in this case, I came across that I found out that a lot of these victims, they wanted justice, but they were unable to go ahead because of various constraints. They could be financial constraints. They did not know what to do. They did not know who to approach. That thing is always there, that the quest of justice is very, how should I put it? It's very difficult, and it's also very expensive in a manner speaking. Also, it requires some sort of knowledge, and it requires help from various sections of the society. Then what had happened is that in the High Court, when both the writ petition was filed, trying to prove that Section 21, subsection 5 of the NIA Act was ultra vires, and the appeal was also filed. As in, the people who are there in the court, and I happened to visit once the High Court, the NIA did not appeal, and interestingly, it said that it continuously invoked 21(5) and said that the writ petition is not maintainable. So that came across as a more or less like a shocker, because of the fact that a lot of people are under the impression that it is the security agencies which invariably will appeal against a case, but that did not happen. That was a lot of the stuff that I'm telling you has already been reported, so you can find a lot of it in newspapers. Just a simple Google search will do. Now, the other thing that happened is that the appeal and the writ petition have been tagged, and back then the Chief Justice had said, and he was speaking to the NIA Special Public Prosecutor, that let the writ petition be there. If it fails, if the petitioners fail, or if the council fails to prove that this is ultra vires, then of course the appeal will also be dismissed. And if the writ petition stands, then we will see. That's what he said. So that was a very interesting thing that had happened. And like I said before, there was a lapse of 90 days, and then people tried to get the delay condoned. So more or less, this is broadly speaking, this is how the Makkah Masjid blast case transpired. There were a lot of things that have a lot of reactions that came about in connection with the courts of law. And if you see that it is very important to know that there are a lot of people, given the fact that in light of certain judgments, people have been saying, they say that, we don't have faith in courts of law, but I don't think that is the right approach. I think all legal remedies must be exhausted, all legal avenues must be explored. So I think I will stop here, and this is in a nutshell the Makkah Masjid blast case. If there are any questions, I think I will be happy to take them. Javai?
Yeah. Thank you, Syed Mohammed. Yes, definitely we'll have questions. And I'm sure that the kind of elaborations you provided were
I cannot hear you.
early section.
I lost you there for about 20 seconds, Zia sir. Zia sir.
Yeah, Mohammed bhai.
Yeah, I lost you there for about a minute or so.
Yeah, Zia Saab, I think there is some technical issue with him. So one thing you can do directly, you can go into the Q&A section.
Okay.
At the bottom, you have Q&A section. So people start posing questions over there. So you can pick up whatever the questions you want to reply.
Okay.
So you can read out, if you want, you can read out by yourself and reply to those queries.
All right. Now, there is a question about why couldn't authorities present strong evidence, and why special NIA judge resigned post the verdict. Now, see, the thing is, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a journalist. I will not speculate on such things. Simply because of the fact that I'm not authorized to, and I'm not a subject matter expert. Whatever I've told you is through through interactions and through with stakeholders and through stories which I've done. So you'll have to forgive me for that. And how many innocent youths were shot by Hyderabad police, and how many died? How many police officers were suspended, and are they reinstated now? So, like I said before, just a second, bullet injuries, 5 people died because of bullet injuries. 9 people died in the blast. There was a committee which was there to probe, the role of police in opening fire into the crowd. So this, in a manner of speaking, report has still not been tabled in the assembly. I had done a story about that as well. I had filed an RTI through a friend of mine, SQ Masood. I'm sure a lot of people know him here. And I must also add that SQ Masood was one of the petitioners in the writ petition seeking to challenge the NIA Act of 2008, Section 25, subsection 5. These are the 2 things I would like to point out. Unfortunately, the report has not seen the light of day.
Do you also think that NIA has failed to provide justice, and that also create a lot of misconceptions about?
Yeah. The matter is sub judice. Again, I will not say much about it. Now, what needs to be looked at is how and when the appeal will be taken up. So let's just wait for that. I think that is the best thing.
I mean, what is the perception of people in Hyderabad, who have been following, who have been victim of this, and then those who were released after the arrest for long years? I mean, with your reporting, what kind of perception it generates among the people?
I have spoken to a lot of people in connection with the blast case, and including the victims. Many of them are living in abject poverty. That is what I would like to say, and they understand that it is very important for them to seek justice, and they are very keen on that. One victim, he lost 2 members of his family on the same day. The other lost a husband, and their lives have been a struggle. Otherwise, there are few people who have managed to move on, but it's very difficult for people to forget what had happened to them. In connection with the blast, again with the verdict, yes, a lot of people were concerned. A lot of people were, worried as to if there were these many acquittals, then who was behind the blast? And if you could just refresh my memory on the other aspects of the question, please, Akhil.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of perception it has left among the people, that entire the process of investigation and then judgment creates a lot of strong perception, which is to believe on judiciary system or, feel array of this.
I think it would, like I said before I ended my little monologue, is that, the judiciary is, a lot of people think, is the last resort. And I think that the people should maintain their confidence in the judiciary. नाउमीदी की कोई मतलब जितना हो सके कोशिश ना करें कि नाउमीद हो, but then again, yeah, there are a lot of good things that are happening. So I would like to say that yes, there were some people who were very worried about the verdict, but then again, let's see what happens now.
There is a question that a compensation suit filed in city civil court against police personnel.
Yes.
And then those compensations should be paid from the salaries of the police personnel. So any idea about that?
Yes, there was a lot of people had said that, but at the moment I do not have information readily available about it, and it's been a while since I visited that particular aspect of the case. So but certainly I will try to get information, and I'll try to share it with you. And in connection with the committee which was formed, the Bhaskar Rao committee, I have mentioned that I wrote about it, I think in 2016, after obtaining a response from by means of the RTI Act, that the report is yet to be tabled, and the government back then did not want to share a copy of that report, and it invoked a certain section of the RTI Act, which states that unless the legislature or the parliament takes it up, it will not be made available for public consumption.
An interesting question from your field, in fact, maybe.
And another thing that I'm seeing here is that you have said that the blast victims did not come to know what to do regarding filing the case. That is not the case, and we went and spoke to them. Yes, I also mentioned that a lot of people were active, and a lot of people have spoken to a lot of to the victims. I did say that. They agreed to be petitioners, but later they stepped back and said that we don't want problems further. Yes, like I said before, many people were very concerned about what to do. Of course, there was a concern in connection with their safety. A lot of people are very worried about that. But then again, an appeal was filed, and at least 2 petitioners came forward.
Do you see some negative impacts in the field of journalism or in the life of journalists, and also about the journalism, in the society, that the reporting had a different turns in the last 10 years. So, I mean, out of your experiences, how can you reflect upon on this?
How can I reflect upon the turn in experiences? I didn't get that.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of impacts a journalist leave in the civil society in the life of their reportings, So, can you?
You're right. Journalists have a very important job to do, and it would behoove them if they stick to the facts. That is a cardinal rule of journalism which must not be broken. So yes, I think as long as we stick to that particular rule, I think we would be doing our jobs fairly decently, I would say.
If you can also quickly throw some light, what is specifically about Muslim response out of this delay in the.
What is special about?
The delay in the justice on Makkah Masjid Blast case.
Okay.
What is the response and what is the feeling of the people in city? Because you cover a lot of the people's responses.
I find that like I said before, this has not faded from public memory. But then again, I think it would now be left to the courts to decide as to how they take it up. In connection with the Makkah Masjid blast, a lot of people have not forgotten it. That is all that I can say. And of course, there will be concern unless the perpetrators are brought to justice. There will be concern. There will be people who will be wondering as to what exactly transpired, and I hope that happens soon.
I asked this question only because in fact, whenever we used to visit the old city, and then we would talk to the people who are the commoners there, that are they aware about this, what is there in their memory, and then you have people living in plural society, you have one by the other different religious groups. And these cases divide people on the basis of communal, on the kind of.
I lost you there again for some time. Ab phir se bataiye that.
Okay, what I was just sharing my experience also, that when we would go to old city area and then talk to people, and if you by general talk you remind them that what happened to this case, what kind of response they have about. So you have a lot of people forgotten about it. They have very, very least understanding, or they say this is not our concern. But when you see social media, when you see political metaphors and narratives, you find that this is one of the major incidents happening in Hyderabad in the last 20 years, if we say. So, is it that there is also a conscious attempt to dilute these cases by the political groups or certain group of the society, where this goes out of your memory, and then when there is a judgment like this, NIA court gives somebody, it was not really very major issue to everyone.
I would like to look at the case, in a without the lens of religion or community. So I think this is an act of terrorism, and it must be probed as such. In connection with the politics behind it, I think that is a discussion for perhaps another time.
Yeah. This small question.
You're right when it comes to social media and what is happening on offline. There is to a certain extent I do agree with you. Yes, social media, like I said before, is an indicator of responses of people, of whether the case has remained or rather lingered in public memory. I agree with you on that, but I would like to believe that a lot of people still remember what happened.
Yeah, this is one question which says that did you find that Telugu media, both print and electronic, played a more dangerous role in demonizing Muslims after the blast?
Okay, I don't know how to read Telugu, unfortunately.
Yeah, true for many of us. Yeah.
Apologies.
Can you throw some reflections about the State Human Rights Commission's role played in this, and then whether they formed any inquiry committee to look into the police torture after the blast?
Yeah, police torture was also a major point of concern. Of course, it is a concern. If you listen to what some of the victims of the alleged police torture have to say, I mean, it's spine chilling, and it makes your hair stand. And you hope that this never befalls anybody or you don't know, or anybody. So yeah, that was a major point of concern. But let me get back to you on the SHRC bit. I'll get back to you on that.
I don't know whether this covers to your area, but then there's a small linked question that any blast or any incident similar to Mecca Masjid blast, which is there in other side of the country, do you find there is a common narrative created and linked to one by the other blast?
Yeah, in fact,
it creates larger perception.
Yeah. In fact, one of the Makkah Masjid blast accused has been awarded life imprisonment in another case. I don't know, all of a sudden I went blank which case that is. That was the Ajmer or some other blast case. Either one of the two. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello, Zia bhai.
Yeah.
So we have lost the connection.
Yeah.
Let's wait for a while. Musab, can you connect him once? Because we lost his connection. If you can just call him and ask him to rejoin.
Have you lost connect with Muhammad?
Yeah. Is he audible to you?
No, but he seems to be on time.
No,
I
but
thought I have lost my connect.
no, he's not audible. Masood Sahab, can you connect him once? Hello? Hello?
My apologies. I think there was a problem with my laptop. So
Yeah, okay, no issues, Mohammed bhai. You can proceed, please.
yeah. So if there is anything else, any other question that needs to be answered. Is there any other thing that, is there any other question? Just wanted to check, please.
There is a small question
Yeah.
about the defense lawyers, whether they changed over the period of time. I'm not aware, but this short question somebody is asking that how about the defense lawyers changed?
Defense law. I am purely speaking from the point of view of the appeal and the writ petition. So I am not sure about the defense lawyers. But let me get back to you on that.
What is the current status of the case? If you have anything to add into that.
Yeah. So now what has happened is the writ petition which seeks to challenge Section 25, subsection 5 of the NIA Act, that is pending, and that has been tagged with the appeal which was filed by two petitioners, two victims of the Makkah Masjid blast. And we will, I guess, have to wait and see as to when the case will be listed for hearing. So in a nutshell, that is the current status of the case.
Did you also have some exposure or reading the case out? I mean, FIR and the content of the FIR, because ultimately judgment is based on the kind of FIR it is filed, the kind of content which is there in the FIR.
Yes, I have copies of the FIRs. I also have, I've also accessed some of the documents which were produced in the court. Yes, I have. Again, like I said before, I am speaking to you as a journalist, and it would be improper for me to speak about the content of such material. And I think the best person to speak to would be perhaps a lawyer who's dealing with that case, because he is the person who's truly competent. I'm speaking to you from a perspective of telling you stories and also from the narrations which I have been given by stakeholders.
Yes, absolutely right. I agree, and in fact,
I would not like to comment on something which I'm not capable of commenting. As simple as that. I'm not qualified. I'm not a qualified lawyer. I hope you understand that.
Yeah,
if there is anything else, perhaps we can move the conversation offline and just
exactly
have an informed chat.
Yeah, that ends well with the idea that
just one small thing. I would like to once again emphasize that it would not be such a good idea to lose faith in a lot of the institutions, because we are seeing some really good things happening. as well. So with that note, I think I would say that naumidi karne ki naumid hone ki zarurat nahi hai. That is what I would say. I would urge you to have a bit of a positive outlook.
Absolutely, right said that hope should stay alive, and then that is the only hope we have on judiciary, that we keep hoping and fighting for the right cause. And the end note by Syed Muhammad was absolutely true with the title we have of the today's talk, that it was a reporter's diary. It was not the diary of a lawyer or someone else. So we could hear a journey of reporters writing on this case in the backdrop of Hyderabad, which we have and many of us aware about it. I think this went very well and interesting to all of us. I welcome all of you to join for the next series we'll be having from legal point of view on the same case. But let me thank Syed Muhammad for giving us very extensive, elaborative informations and ideas which is not created in his room, but by his traveling, meeting with the people, interacting with the people in the city and who are accused also. Thank you, Syed Muhammad.
And one small thing I would also like to add is that one of the lawyers worked on the case is Monis Abidi. I think he should also be mentioned, because I'm told he has worked a lot, and I've also interacted with him. So due credit to him also. Thank you so much for having me here, Zia Saab, Laik and Masood Saab. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We look forward for hearing you again. And as you said, offline talks we'll be discussing on this issue much more in detail. Thanks everyone participant here. I see a lot of people who have been following this case and very active in their own field. Thank you everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.